Brad, you've had a heck of a week on social media, haven't you, my friend?
Holy cats. I have never had such a week listen, you and I were both early adapters to social media, whether it was Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. We got on board early. I've been doing Twitter since 2008. I have never had a week like I just had this past week.
It's that good a week. Oh, all right.
It has been mind-spinning. So it all started, as you know, if you've listened to this show for a long time, Instagram has been vexing me since day one. I cannot get traction on Instagram for nothing. So I'm like, I see all these reels on Instagram. And I'm like, maybe I'll post a couple thoughts on the creative process and put up on Instagram just to see if I can make something happen, if I can get a heartbeat. Remember, I had hired an assistant for an entire year to post just things on Instagram 2 and 3 times a day, just because I thought consistency would do something. Nothing. I stayed between 1,500 and the low 1,600.
So incredible growth over a year of effort.
Yes,
Yeah.
And paying an assistant, right?
Stratospheric is the word to use.
No fault of the assistant. They were doing exactly what they were supposed to do, but good Lord. So I start to post some of these videos, and they get good engagement for Instagram, which is to say in the dozens, maybe in the hundreds, not setting the world on fire. Chris Hallbeck DMs me and says, Brad, for the love of God, put those on TikTok. Trust me.
Wait, what was that? What was that app again?
Put those on TikTok.
Oh, you said it was an A on. You said
Tic like Tic Tac.
It sounded like Chicago all of a sudden. Oh, you're gonna want to put those on Tic Tac.
You're gonna want those on Tic Tac. So,
sure.
Chris was the one who tried to get me into Instagram early when I maybe could have built an audience.
Sure.
So I've learned to think twice when ignoring Chris Hallbeck. So literally, when I got the DM, I happened to be in front of the computer. I stopped what I was doing. I dug up my TikTok. I had posted a couple of things on TikTok, and kind of you and I talked about it on the show, and you said you had misgivings about it, and I'm like, yeah, Dave's probably right. And I literally deleted it off of my phone, got rid of it.
Oh no, Dave Kellett once again killing dreams. Okay, keep going.
So I dug it back up, re-signed in, got everything set up again, and within 5 minutes posted a couple of things on TikTok. And told Chris, there's maybe 3 people who could have gotten me to do that, but here it is. So that was April 21st. And I started to get really encouraging engagement, like a lot of views and a lot of really thoughtful questions and comments, like I've never really seen before, like insightful, thoughtful things being said back. Sometimes agreeing with me, sometimes saying, well, I've got another way of thinking about it, but you could tell they were thinking about it.
Right, they were on, yeah.
This was unusual. Then a couple days later, I posted a video about how you shouldn't get discouraged about doing something if you find out your idea is similar to someone else's idea, because as I said in an earlier video, ideas are bullshit. It's all about the engagement, not about the idea. It's you pouring your creativity into the idea so that at the end, nobody can recognize it anymore. It's yours, right?
Right.
This thing goes through the roof. I actually posted it last week while we were recording, and then, of course, didn't look at it. I posted
while
it.
We were recording. Look at that professionalism in terms of multitasking.
I posted it at 10 o'clock. We were started the show at 11:30. I didn't look at it again. I open it up after we're done. It's in the hundreds of views and comments and likes going through the roof. This thing is by the time I went to bed, it was at 50,000 views. I had a couple hundred comments. I've never experienced this before, Dave. I couldn't keep up with the comments. Every time I refreshed my phone, there were more comments. And I literally, even if I just wanted to say thank you, I couldn't keep up. It was that amazing.
Immediate question. So my first thought is, do you think basically that the problem has been that you've just been hiding the sheer sex appeal of a video of Brad Guigar from the world?
Who
And
wouldn't
now that it's revealed, like the likes come pouring in, the comments, it's like, who is this Tom Selleck
Who wouldn't
cartoonist?
want this? That's why we're doing a live cast for the podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, this is amazing.
So I went to bed at 50,000. I woke up to 70,000. I woke up, I came downstairs. Of course, my sons are teasing me like, oh, great. You're going to be a TikToker now. This is
Grandpa
wonderful.
discovered TikTok.
Yeah. Exactly. And they were trying to explain to me certain things like duets and stitches, and I can't get my head around it. They were making a lot of fun of Grandpa trying to figure this out. But Grandpa came downstairs with 60,000 views. And by the time he got done with his breakfast, he was at 70,000 views. And it just keeps going. It's at 100,000 views today. And everything I've posted since is in the thousands of views.
Well, now let me ask you, though, because I saw that video brought over to Twitter.
Yeah.
And it also got an ungodly number from Twitter, which you've never gotten traction before.
No. Well,
why is this imprimatur of TikTok suddenly the magic touch for Brad Guigar?
That's a great question. So it's because I'm kind of A/B testing. I'm putting the same videos on Instagram where I'm getting a weak heartbeat. I'm putting the same videos on Twitter where I'm getting good engagement, but not great engagement, right? Now, it's, by the way, this was, like I said, I started on April 21st. April 21st. Within days, David, I had more followers on TikTok than I did on Instagram. On the next day, I had double the number of followers on TikTok than I did on Instagram.
In 2 days?
Within the next day after I crossed it on one day, I doubled it on the next. Okay.
It is so weird how that can happen on social media where one thing will just skyrocket in a way that's like, I put the same thing up on the other one. Why did it? Anyway,
we're going to talk about that in a minute.
Yeah.
So Instagram, I'm blowing out of the water. Twitter, I again, posting the same content, I get a little bit of a rise. Until a couple days later, I wake up, and of course, like a dummy I am, first thing I reach for is the phone to see how things are going on social media. Open it up, and I see a Twitter mention that says, "Hey, credit the artist. That was Brad Guigar." What's this guy talking about, right? So I go to see the tweet that he's talking about. Come to find out that this very nice person, who's a wonderful freelance illustrator, took my TikTok video, posted it on Twitter, and he's getting hundreds of thousands of views.
God damn it!
But he didn't post my Twitter handle on the tweet. So he just says, "Hey, these are some great, thoughts," or whatever. He says, "This is so true. Post my..." Now, in the Twitter, in the TikTok video, you see my TikTok handle.
Sure, it's always that tiny white handle. Yeah.
Yes, but it's not, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute. It's not clickable, so it doesn't matter. Right. Nope. And so this person, this very nice, I'll give him a shout out, Tom Nook, says, "Hey, credit the artist."
Wait, Tom Nook of Animal Crossing? This is amazing.
You know what? I didn't even connect those dots, but maybe that's him. Maybe it is the same guy.
Maybe he's just trying to sell you some bells. That's what it is.
So Tom says, do this. By the way, if you go to this, I don't think this illustrator who posted it originally, there was no malicious intent. Now, if you go to the illustrator's Twitter, the first thing you see on his Twitter profile is, "Don't post my work without credit." And then very nicely, he says, "Hey, you know what? And by the way, I'm serious. That's just irony. That's not me trying to ascribe malicious intent, because we've all done that. You see something you like, and just hit and you share it. You don't think about, oh, maybe I should go and find out if this guy's on Twitter." He says, "I didn't even know Guigar was on Twitter." And then he goes and he posts something very, very nice about me with my handle.
Sure.
By the way.
Okay, well, that's a good recovery, but you and I know that if it's not in the original tweet, that doesn't count for shit.
As of today, the original tweet, 361,000 views, 34,000 likes, 752 quote tweets, 13,000 retweets. Now, when he said that thing about what a nice person I am,
you should check out Guigar. 1 retweet, right?
19 likes.
19 likes.
19 likes. The end.
Social media is the best. Social media is the best.
Now I've got this thing that's getting thousands of views. And by the way, as far as I understand Twitter, when I say 300,000 views, that's just for his tweet. All of those 304,000 retweets, have their own counter.
No, I think who cares? We don't need to argue the semantics, but I think it tracks it in a retweet. I think a quote tweet maybe is a separate
Thank goodness,
counter,
because that's been killing me too. But anyway, my Twitter, meanwhile, has bumped up. Ready for this? Give me a drum roll. 126 followers.
126 followers. Yeah, okay.
But
that tracks.
So we need to talk about Twitter today, or I'm sorry, we need to talk about TikTok today, because it really is showing itself to be a high engagement social media without a doubt. The problem is, I don't know that I would have gotten this kind of engagement posting comics. In fact, my first several posts were comics, even with an animated walkthrough and stuff, because clearly this is a video place. This is a video platform. I was not getting hundreds of thousands of views posting comics. This was when I posted art motivation type stuff.
Right. Well, I've got a lot of thoughts jumping right in on this. Yeah. One, how wonderful that you're finding a new platform that's working for you in some regard. That's great.
Yeah.
Two, it's really interesting that what's taking off for you is video-based advice on cartooning. And it's worth noting it's not cartooning itself, right? It's
right.
Because we've all seen what takes off on TikTok for cartooning, and it's usually an animated version of a comic strip, which, as we all know, is sometimes twice as much work as doing the comic strip itself, depending on how detailed you get. So there's that. But also, here is my immediate fear with TikTok is that 400,000 followers and $1 on TikTok will get you $1. You know, like, what does it get you on TikTok? Kind of like Instagram. What does it get you if this really blows up? And first of all, it's great that it's blowing up. I can see that it's benefiting Brad Guigar as a brand because you have webcomics.com, you have the Webcomics Handbook, you have all those things that are resources for cartoonists to better their career, which is a wonderful aspect of your personality, and ComicLab, I guess, to some extent.
Right.
But it's tricky in that is it also perhaps the shiny object that's exciting because you're getting love and you're getting shares and likes and all that sort of stuff. But it's a lot of what's that German phrase, Sturm and Drang, or Drang and Sturm? I always forget what it is. But it's a lot of hype, but doesn't really get you much. You know what I mean? It's a lot of spinning wheels that don't get you down the road far.
So there's so much we need to talk about in that regard. Number one, yes, and what you folks are hearing at home is what I wish for each of you. A friend that wants the best for you and is cheering you on, but then asks the hard, objective questions. Like, yes, this has been exciting, but what does it mean?
Right.
So we're going to talk about that. A couple other things that I can just knock off really quickly. Remember how this all started out with me trying to improve Instagram? But then Instagram, I got nothing, but TikTok, I was going through the roof. Well, TikTok, for some reason, there's two ways you can put a link on your TikTok profile, one of which is Instagram and the other one is YouTube. You can't put a Twitter link on your profile, right? But you can't. So there's a little Instagram logo on your TikTok profile page. Remember how I was between 15 and 1,600 Instagram followers? I checked today, I'm at 1,900. So in a roundabout way, I've done what I set out to do. I've increased my Instagram followers, but it's got to be connected to TikTok because nothing else was moving the needle.
Right.
Second thing, shiny object. I want to note, all of this happened earlier this week. 7 days prior, we had recorded a show where we were saying, listen, if you want to be a professional cartoonist, you do not get distracted by shiny objects. Listen, you got to have some self-control, dummy. Get out there and do not be distracted by shiny objects. This entire past week
has been shiny object.
Oh my God. I haven't fallen terribly behind, but holy cats, has it been hard not to get distracted by this shiny object that, as you rightly point out, may mean nothing to me as a cartoonist, right?
Yeah. Well,
so what I'm planning on doing in the next week or the next 2 weeks for sure is at some point I've got to do a call to action. And I've already experimented by doing one video where I just talk about something, and I held up the Webcomics Handbook and I said, here's something that I put in the Webcomics Handbook I want to talk about. Well, there's a reason I did that, because I could have introduced that topic 1,000 different ways. But the reason I did that was to see how they were going to react to me holding up merchandise.
Right.
And there was no averse or adverse reaction to that any way, shape, or form. So then it was now what I'm going to do next is probably do something where I offer like 50% off my ebook, a real easy, low-hanging fruit kind of call to action to see if I can get them to click a link and spend some money. And then I'll know the answer to that question a lot better.
Quick interjection. When you do an ebook, are you going to do a Brad Guigar comic book or a Brad Guigar comics reference book or how-to book?
It'll be 50% off the Webcomics Handbook.
Good. Okay. Okay. So your brand is different than my brand in the sense that you have built a wonderful cottage industry of helping cartoonists advance their careers, better their skills, widen their outlook on how to approach cartooning, right? And so I see for you in this TikTok explosive growth the potential for good things for that entire section of your brand, right?
Yeah.
I honestly do. My fear is that TikTok is going to turn out to be for you what it has turned out to be for so many cartoonists, which is like a lot of electricity that doesn't power a damn device in the house. You know, it's like, it shouldn't be that if someone has 1 million followers on Instagram that it's so hard for them to get someone to their store or to get someone to their Kickstarter or to get someone to their Patreon, right? But we know that that's the case. And I know that the TikTok is where the Utes are. All the Utes are, you know, and the very fact that you and I are discovering TikTok means that it's going to be dead within 6 months. That's also the case. I know my age group now, and as soon as I'm like tagged into something, that's when it's about to die. I'm not 22 anymore. But my fear for you is that it is that shiny object that it's like, but I want it to work out. I genuinely do. But a part of me is like, oh no, Brad's like a kitten with a ball of yarn. He's wasting a lot of time on this. I don't know.
No, it's absolutely true. And I will absolutely tell you, this works into an earlier show as well. And that is, we were saying, okay, you know, what happens if Not Safe for Work goes away for whatever reason? Patreon has continually reaffirmed its commitment. But like you say, if someday the venture capital money comes due, that's something that could happen. This part of the reason I'm putting the groundwork on this is for the following. If something happens very quickly that I'm not necessarily prepared for, this is my first pivot, right? I can have that groundwork established so that if something happens to Not Safe for Work, which is my wheelhouse right now, I can pivot to our instruction and I'll have something already set up. The groundwork will be laid. All I've got to do now is tend to the garden, right? Like last week, I posted a video every day. I don't foresee doing that ongoing, and I can't, frankly. So now I got to find a nice little balance, maybe 3 videos a week or 2 videos a week. Keep that going, keep building that, just in case. The whole reason to do that for me is because it's my first pivot. For the person listening to this podcast, what does TikTok mean to you? I don't know the answer to that question yet. I see Halbeck is doing really well, but he's animating his stuff. He's doing full animation. He's doing the word balloons pop up. He's doing voiceover. There's some light actual movement in his comics. He's basically doing an animation. What does that mean for you if you're not capable or willing or able to do that? I have no idea. No idea.
Like, I don't know how TikTok could be made to work for me by comparison, right? So here's one way I could see it working for us. You and I could put up shared ComicLab videos and have some sort of ComicLab branding on, and that could maybe pay forward an audience to Patreon eventually from TikTok, finding the show, and then, you know, the idea being that you cast the widest net on TikTok so that you get 10% of them to check out the show, so that you get 10% of those to eventually join Patreon, right? That's possible. And a version of that could be what's going to happen with you on with the Webcomics Handbook and with your own stuff on webcomics.com. that's the ideal, is that you cast a super wide net on TikTok so that you get 10% of that audience, so that you get 10% of them to either buy a thing or join you on Patreon.
Right.
My fear is just that it's I don't know. I don't entirely trust TikTok to be. I don't know. Part of it is also
this is where we get into a really dicey space, because you and I had a phone conversation. And again, speaking of asking the tough questions, it was like, yeah, but do you first question was, do you think all of that engagement is real? And of course, my first response was, what, you mean you think like the equivalent of Twitter bots? Right, because we know there's bots on Twitter. We know there's a bunch of fake engagement on Twitter.
And we also know there's a big incentive for, no matter where in the world that company is based, a big incentive to put the perception of growth. Like, you join TikTok, you're going to have bang zoom numbers, right? Same thing that Facebook Video did, and they got caught lying in that federal court case, you know, is that they want you to think that it's through the moon. Of course the numbers are great. And so they're going to juice it a little bit, you know, that kind of thing.
And then the other question was, do you trust TikTok since it's hosted on Chinese servers? And so maybe the Chinese, maybe there's some nefarious plot, right? That they're going to use your stuff to do weird things to game the political system, you know, like Facebook.
And again, just to delineate that, that's not in any way a distrust of the Chinese people, who are wonderful and creative and fantastic.
Yes.
It's the Chinese political system of the communist, like ByteDance has to answer to the Chinese Communist Party. ByteDance is the owner of TikTok. Right. And unfortunately, that does have real world considerations for a government that's actively committing genocide against the Uyghurs. You know, like, that's not a small consideration of in terms of human rights.
Neither is the consideration of how Facebook has been involved in the political process and the stuff.
No.
It's like, okay, I mean, here's the problem. Where do you go to find the good guys?
Yeah, no, you're not wrong.
You don't. It's like, you can't say TikTok is evil unless you're willing to say Facebook is evil. You can't say Facebook is evil unless you're willing to get rid of Instagram. You can't say anything about them unless you're willing to get rid of Twitter too. There's no good guys in all of this.
Yeah,
that's the unfortunate truth.
I will say this, and this is the weird comparison, because I know they are absolutely acting as a monopolistic power in their hardware, but Apple at least has set up their business where the data is hidden, because they're not building their business on the interpretation or the selling to of your data. They're building it on selling you products. So they have very wisely said, you know what, we're gonna treat your data differently than other companies. But at the same time, they're treating their app store and their other things as a huge monopoly, as the lawsuit with Epic Games is showing. So everybody's a bad guy in their own unique way, and you just kind of have to make deals with your devils in your own way, I guess, as you work your way through online. But it's tricky. It is tricky in that regard.
Yeah, so I guess at some point we got to put a button on this, and the button that I'm willing to put on it is TikTok is definitely a major player on social media, and I don't know what that means for cartoonists, and I think that we're going to have to just see how people experiment and what takes root, but it's definitely something I think you should have your eye on.
And what's nice about this in the show is that we're not saying we have the final answer on this. You're hearing us in real time working through the problems and working through the potential of what it could be for a cartoonist as a tool, right? Not as the be-all, end-all, not as the give up on it right now, but as a potential one tool, one other leg under the table for your career. So on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, at 19 minutes in, and say welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Guigar, editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc.
And I'm his friend Dave Kellett, the guy who forgot to start the show about 10 minutes ago, the cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon, and the co-director of Stripped.
This week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend. So since you mentioned Patreon, I'm going to mention right up at the top of the show here, we have a new feature that's kind of exciting. In June now, you can sign up to patreon.com/comiclab at the $10 level and see every week's show recorded live, which is fun because you'll not only get to see our facial reactions when we make fun of one another, but you'll get to see the mistakes, the hiccups, the boo-boos, the little moments where we don't do so good.
The struggling with technology.
Yeah. But it's a fun little thing every week, and it's called ComicLab Live Gab, and over at patreon.com/comiclab at the $10 level, you can join in addition to all the other rewards at that tier. You'll be able to check out the show live, right, Brad?
Absolutely. And we're going to be looking for you when you get there. We're going to have a lot of fun. It's going to be great.
Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it. No worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Okay, Brad, well, we'll turn into our first question for the day over on patreon.com/ComicLab. This comes in from Jay Lark, who writes, "Hey, Dave and Brad, I've been noticing several content creators, new and experienced alike, who've been taking pre-orders on their store for a new merch item instead of launching a Kickstarter campaign. You've said that one major benefit of Kickstarter is the ability to conduct market research before spending money producing something. So, assuming a creator already has reasonable confidence in the market, what are some other benefits to running a Kickstarter campaign rather than going it alone with a pre-order? When, if ever, would you recommend doing a pre-order instead of a Kickstarter campaign? Thanks for all the advice, encouragement, and laughs, Jay Lark." All right, Brad, there's the question for you. Pre-orders versus Kickstarter. Which way do you land? How do you land? Why do you land? Why am I using the word land so much? Keep going.
I don't think I would ever personally do this, nor would I ever recommend doing pre-orders instead of a Kickstarter. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But I think when I hear about this person saying, well, people are taking pre-orders instead of a Kickstarter, that is not a good fit for me, would never be a good fit for me. And there are so many problems that I could foresee that I would have a hard time endorsing it for another person.
Well, I will jump in right away. And I think you and I both agree on this one, is that the problem with taking a pre-order is that you're essentially either pinging someone's credit card or pinging their PayPal account or pinging some sort of active payment system. And most, if not all of them, have a sort of security system in place where if you don't receive the item, if the transaction is not finished, then it pings sort of a fraud alert thing and you get the money refunded to you because you're like, hey, I ordered this thing from Amazon, it never came. And so Visa goes, okay, ping, we refund that money back to you, right?
Yeah.
If I order from Brad Guigar and 3 months go by and that item hasn't come in, you're going to have a not tiny number of readers go, hey, I want my money back, credit card company, not Brad Guigar, credit card company. And then you get pinged as a fraud source. So then it's a whole different sort of problem. Yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, that's a part of learning your webcomics history or your internet publishing history. That's why Kickstarter was born, was because people were doing pre-orders mostly on PayPal. And then a lot of people were saying, hey, I pre-ordered this book and it never came, or it's taking longer than I thought it would. And I want my money back. And so Patreon put up it was either a 30 or a 60-day limit where if you didn't get your merchandise within that time frame, they just refunded your money on an automatic basis. So what's going to happen if you take pre-orders and then this thing it takes longer to produce? And by the way, that very often happens.
Very often, even with all the best intentions.
Yeah. What happens when this thing takes a little longer to produce and then you start losing the money that you had gotten through pre-orders, either through PayPal or the credit card companies? Now you lost the money to do the thing, or worse yet, you've already spent it and now you owe it. Holy cats. This has so many dangers, so many red flags involved in it that I really don't understand what the upside. Listen, I don't want to hear what the upside is. There's no upside that's worth the amount of risk you're taking.
Yeah, and again, continuing on Brad's idea of the prehistory of comics, another problem that we used to have before Kickstarter is, hey, gang, I'm promising to the world that I'm doing this Sheldon book. It's going to be, let's make it extraordinary. It's a hardcover, 700 pages, and it's going to be $100. And if you pre-order it now, I guarantee you'll have it in 3 months, okay? So separate from the production schedule, which, as Brad and I said, with all the best intentions, can still have problems. Both Brad and I have experienced that even after 20 books. with all the best intentions, you can still have production problems. But the difference, the other problem that's very large that we didn't talk about is that I am now publicly committing to making a product that I might sell only 2 of.
Yeah.
So then my cost of goods sold, the cost that it is to me to make that item, is extraordinarily high because I'm not producing that many of them. And as you all know, as the volume goes up, the price of a unit goes down. So that's one of the reasons why Kickstarters have minimums, because it lets you as the creator know, okay, you're at least going to make this much money.
Yeah.
And if you make this much money, then you're okay to proceed. But not so with a pre-order. Like I have and do and will put up things, and the collective reaction is, yeah, no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
You know, and then sometimes I will and do and have put up things where people, I wonder if people will like that. Sells gangbusters. How do I know? The way I know, as Brad always says, is by market testing it through Kickstarter.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to put a caveat on this, and that is what we're talking about here is a true pre-order. Because there's one way that I think that people may be playing this game where they're offering pre-orders, but it's not a pre-order. They've got everything built. They've got everything printed. It's sitting in a warehouse.
Yes.
And through doing a pre-order, they might be trying to get a whole big influx of orders into a distributing service like Amazon, for example. And in getting a whole bunch in the opening days, they cement their place in the algorithm and they can put themselves in a good position as the book, for example, moves forward throughout its life in distribution. I could see that game being played, but that's not a true pre-order. That's a marketing approach that would have to be discussed separately.
Right. And to be fair, I have done it where if the item is low stakes and I've either already produced it or it's a week or 2 from being produced, like a sticker, a pin, not something like a book where the cost per unit is gigantic, but where the cost per unit is pennies on the dollar, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yes, I will do a pre-order from that because by God, I'm going to make that damn thing. It costs me not that much money and it's not that hard to make. And so the prints are going to be made, the postcards are going to be made, the pins are going to be made, whatever the small unit is going to be made. Something like that. You know what I mean? Where the stakes are low, the costs are low, the production is not tricky to do. If this company fails, I can find another company within weeks to make it. So I have on those occasions done a pre-order, but that's not necessarily, J. Lark, that's not necessarily overconfidence in my career. It's just confidence in that specific type of product.
Yeah.
And that I feel like is different than a large type item that is either hard to produce, expensive to produce, or only is worthwhile to produce at a certain volume. And for those, I think both Brad and I would say Kickstarter is the route to go.
Yeah. Yes. There's nothing I can add to that isn't beating a dead horse. The Kickstarter is there for a reason. It's been a major player for a long time, and that's for good reason. I don't see any reason for abandoning it now.
And on that note, I will jump us over to our next question from patreon.com/ComicLab. This question comes in from Brian King, and Brian writes, Dave and Brad, I'm currently working in the travel industry at a job I loved. It's gotten pretty bleak since COVID. Oh my God, I can only imagine. And I am worried I may be laid off soon. I've been making comics every weekday for over 2 years. Good for you. That's great. I make a small amount of money from it and continue to grow my audience and improve my comic. But I'm always wondering what it would be like if this was my full-time job. I'm hoping to be a full-time cartoonist in 3 more years, and I have absolutely no want for a different job. If I'm laid off, should I work at making my comics something that I could live off of? I have cut my expenses massively during the pandemic, and I feel I might come close. Brad, does he take this leap of faith?
I would be remiss in suggesting under these circumstances that you do that. I don't think it's a good idea, because you know what I didn't hear in all of that is Dave Kellett's advice, which he said on the show a couple times, right? Which is what?
Well, I think I know where you're going with this. Your Brad's doing some weird hand gesture, and I have no idea what that is. So I'm just going to say,
how many months?
6 months of savings.
Yes,
at least, if not a year of savings, it would be my personal friendship requirement. Not something that you have to do, but something that I would want for you as a friend to have in the bank before you make this leap. Because if I'm reading between the lines of your question. It doesn't have the feeling of a lot of savings. it has the feeling of someone that's making it work in a bad situation, but that doesn't read as, I can tell, Brian, that you have savings built up of 6 months of life expenses, 12 months of life expenses. And what does that mean? That means if you lost your job tomorrow, Brian, you would have 6 months worth of savings that you could live off of, pay your rent, pay your car payments, pay all your heating, electrical, food bills, right? Your insurance, all that sort of stuff. That's what I mean by 6 to 12 months of savings. And so even with that, I personally think, Brad, I would be remiss if I said this is a great time to roll the dice.
Yeah.
I feel like, Brian, after 2 years, you're on the track, you're seeing the goal, and that's good. You're seeing how this could come to pass, and that's good. But I don't know that you're there yet after 2 years such that you could make the leap. I would want you to put in a few more years with some kind of job that's bringing in some kind of income. You're continuing to do this on nights and weekends. You're building up that savings so that you have, at first, just try to get to a month and then get to 3 months of savings and then to 6 months of savings. And even then, I would feel so much better with a few more years of both growing the audience on one side and also building up your savings on the other side. Brad, what do you think?
I think you're absolutely right. And here, so then the question becomes, well, how will I know when I'm ready to make that jump? Right. Yeah. Other than the 6 months, which I stand by, I having that as a cushion is really important. Okay. But okay. So how will I know when I'm ready to make that jump? Well, your Patreon is your first indication of your ability to get people to reach for their wallets and to support this thing that you're doing. Are you making livable money on Patreon, for example? That's the first thing that is going to start to give you an idea that you're ready to take this step. And of course, the second is your ability to get people to support Kickstarters, and not only support it so that you make just enough to get the thing created, but obviously you want to go beyond that and have extra money that the Kickstarter produces that you can hold back after you've covered all of your expenses. And these are all things you can do while you're still working, right? You can do a Patreon while you're working a day job. You can do a Kickstarter when you're working a day job. Your ability to make those two things work are going to be your first indication that maybe you're ready to take this step. When you've got 6 months in the background, in the bank, then you can do it.
Yeah. So I have two thoughts to add to Brad's great points. One is, you had said, Brad, when do you know when you're ready?
Yeah.
I would think it's this. I would think when you have the savings in the bank, right? You've got that 6 months to ideally 12 months of savings in the bank. But then also, I would think that before you even quit the day job, the income from the cartooning is somewhere in the range of 60 to 80% of what your current salary is.
Yeah.
And I'm not being facetious or off the cuff about that. You need to have proved to yourself that with an extra 20, 30, 40 hours of work a week, that you could take what is already 60% of your current income and get it up to 100% replacement income from your cartooning, right? Then you'll feel better about it. And then the other thing I want to say is that, Brian, the way you do a test run of the comparative terror of making in from solely from your cartooning is, and this also builds up your savings, is you said that you've cut your expenses massively during COVID, which is great, and good on you for that survival technique during terrible times. But what I would suggest is when you get that next job, and you will, keep that massive cut in savings and put all those savings into that bank account.
Right.
And make it a separate account. Like go to, they'll open a second account for you. Open a second account in your bank account so that you do not touch that one. And that is your 6 to 12 month savings account. Take the living from, or the income from that massive savings, put it in there. You'll see what it's like to live poor for a year. First of all, that's a good thing. And then also you won't have the terror, the sheer terror of what it is to not have the savings and to be making a living on your cartooning. You'll go into that first year of your cartooning knowing that you've got a safety net and knowing that you know how to live with that tightened belt. Don't you think, Brad?
Absolutely. And that means, Brian, that you may be looking for another day job if you lose this job in the travel industry, at which point You might be saying, well, do I find kind of a punch in, punch out day job, or do I find a creative day job? And we've talked about the pros and cons of that before. So listen, Brian, you're going to want to listen to this next question a little bit extra close because it's going to talk about just that. This one comes in from our friend and Patreon backer, Monique Belmadiani, and she says, where would you recommend recent graduates look for a creative day job? And what jobs are out there that many new artists do not know about? It seems like most job posting websites like Indeed, Glassdoor, LinkedIn, etc., have limited postings available unless it's for graphic design, which is not all artists know or want to do. So, Dave, let's give some thoughts on how to find a creative day job.
So this is a great question, Monique, and it's not one that's easily answered, but I think there's some fun possibilities. One is, it sounds like you are a recent graduate from an art school, and it didn't clarify in your question that you were or you weren't, but I'm reading between the lines there, and it sounds like you might be. And so one great suggestion is to go to the departments that you know best at your school and ask for whatever networking resources they have for recent graduates or graduates from a decade ago, that sort of thing. There are very often, our art schools will have portfolio reviews with graduates from 10 years prior who are now the mid-level art director of an advertising agency or something like that, right? So that's one resource I would say. The second one I have seen in my own life is that sometimes the most creative companies don't actually list on Indeed or Glassdoor or LinkedIn. They will keep it on their own private, either on their own private jobs website or in their own network. They'll have their employees reaching out like, hey, anybody know anybody that's great at blankety blank, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so part of that is infuriating because if you're not in the network of, hey, I know 7 people that work there, then you're not going to get the job. But like if you live in the Midwest, you might want to check out Hallmark's jobs listings. If you live on the East Coast, I'd recommend Hasbro in New Jersey there. If you live on the West Coast, I myself worked at the packaging department of Mattel for many happy years. I love that. Consumer products companies all have a either packaging company, interior marketing company, and you'll learn a lot of day-to-day skills that'll be really helpful in your own cartooning, right?
Yeah.
Advertising is another one to dip a toe in. It's a little tricky to get in that first door, but once you're in, there's a lot of fun, creative projects in terms of creating a pitch, pitching to a client, then developing for that client, then working for that client. That can be a very satisfying career, although it's very high octane and you kind of burn candles at both ends. But advertising is fun. Brad, additional thoughts from that?
Yeah, so I agree with what Dave said in that you're probably not going to find this job on monster.com. Instead, most of the time, I think you're going to find these positions being talked about on social media like Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And Twitter particularly, I'm a big fan of TweetDeck, and I can set up searches for certain keywords that just every time I open TweetDeck, I see it in one of the columns for this search that I've set up. For you, I would set up some searches that have kind of the field that you want to concentrate in or the type of art that you want to concentrate in, and then a couple keywords like a job or offer or any number of things, position, opening, this kind of thing. Think about what would that tweet sound like for the job that I want to get, and then use some of those keywords, and then just start tracking that so that if something does come up that has those words in it, you're likely to find out about it immediately.
Yeah. Another one that I would say, Monique, is like, let's say you want to get a job at, I don't know, Image Comics or Boom Comics, right? Another strategy you can say is you knowingly have to take the long game. And so you take a job for the next year, 2 years, in frankly a shit job. You don't really enjoy it. It's just to pay the bills, right?
Yeah.
But in the meantime, you are actively checking the Image Comics job website every week, or you're actively checking the Boom Comics website every week, or Marvel or DC or whatever it is, and you're checking and watching Twitter, as Brad said. You're watching their social media. You're looking for anything, feeds from major artists saying, hey, we're hiring for a junior editor, or we're hiring for a new marketing department person. And so that's another thing that you you might have to do, Monique, for the first couple of years, and it's unfortunate, but sometimes you just have to play the waiting game that your window of I just got out of school doesn't match the window of the company needs a position at that exact moment. It is just the unfortunate law of the universe that sometimes it doesn't line up perfectly for you. And so you might have to take a crap job for a couple of years just to get the waiting game of the 5 or 6 companies that you would love to work for that you are now actively going to watch like a shark to see when they have an opening.
Yeah. And the other thing I would say is in terms of being proactive, take a look at your skill set and then take a look at all the different places where you could see your skill set being applied. And I'll tell you exactly what I'm talking about because it's top of mind. As you know, we devoted the first half of the show to it. Right now, if somebody came up to me with really good, solid video editing skills, one of the things I'm trying to think about doing is putting this stuff together. If somebody came up with those skills,
you are so transparent right now. You are so transparent.
Oh no, I'm not gonna make a hire at least for another 6 months. But what I'm saying is I could see how this could connect the dots. And this is something that I think if you're somebody who wants to be a cartoonist, I think you should be reaching out to people whose careers are solidified and saying, how could I help you? Or better yet, this is how I could help you. These are my skills. This is how I could help you. Let's talk about how I could do it. That's really where I'm going. I'm not putting out a job offer. I have got no intention of hiring anybody, but that's how I could see that kind of connection being made.
No, I was laughing because your mind is so clearly on TikTok at the moment that we're like,
oh yeah.
So Brad and Dave, I've got a question about breakfast cereal. Do you prefer Cheerios or Honey Nut? And Brad's like, well, between Cheerios and Honey Nut, I got to tell you, TikTok seems like a really good option. A lot of really good things going on TikTok.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, but I will say this, Monique, is that this is true with a lot of industries, and if there's anyone who's even remotely kind, they will oftentimes allow this to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, let's say there's an industry that you definitely want to get into, Monique, and you'd like to get a creative job at a certain kind of company. You can email a few different people in their either HR department or in the department that you would like to ideally work in someday and say, listen, I understand you're not hiring. I also understand that you're very busy. Would you be willing to have a 10-minute general meeting so that I could introduce myself and ask a few questions about your industry? I would be incredibly helpful to me, and I would, if nothing else, it would prepare you the next time you have a hire. There were people at Mattel when I was hiring. I would take a quick 5-10-minute interview with someone that just had graduated from Art Center or just graduated from Otis Art College, and say, yeah, we don't have anything right now, but your portfolio looks great. Here's what I would recommend if you do apply to Mattel. Work on this kind of stuff. And then it's at least helpful to them, and I potentially can weed out and also find some great potential hires from early general meetings. Don't you think, Brad?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely the way to go. It's going to mean a lot of extra work on your part, and it's going to mean you being a little bit proactive because these jobs are not going to just be floating out there. It's going to be a lot of networking. It's not what you know, but who you know kind of stuff. It's going to be a lot of networking, a lot of putting out word, a lot of legwork on your part that you're going to have to do so that you find yourself mysteriously in the right place at the right time. you know? And we talked about that a couple episodes ago. The only way to make sure you're in the right place at the right time is to be there all the time. And so that's going to have to be what you do.
Absolutely. Brad is on the right path, Monique. So you have now successfully navigated the waters of school. So now your job is getting a job, and it is a job. Job hunting is a job. It's a whole thing. And so one last thing that I would add, and I think Brad has another point too, is that sometimes if your school's network, if your school's job recommendations aren't the best, sometimes you can purview other colleges, regional universities. Sometimes they have them open for reasons that I don't quite understand. Right. They don't require your student ID number or your student ID to enter the website, or they don't require you to show any proof if you walk into their student hiring office. Sometimes, not all the times. Sometimes you can walk into like a major state school and be like, hey, I'm looking for a job. Where's the listings? And they'll point you over to the computer in the corner of the room. That sometimes is the case, very rarely, but that might be a resource you can tap in if you really start getting desperate. And Brad, I think you had one more you wanted to add.
I'll just underline that because we've gotten this question from both sides, and the university, and particularly like the art department at a university or the writing department or an art university, are going to be some of your best options. But we get this question a lot from people who are looking to hire like assistants or looking to hire somebody to do a certain type of job. And we always tell them, go to the art universities, go to the art schools, and look for recent graduates. One of your best bets, as Dave just pointed out, is heading to that university and exploiting their networking opportunities, because that's where we're always telling people to go when they want to hire somebody. That's your first thing. We don't tell them to go to monster.com. We say go to the art school and look for recent graduates who are looking to cut their teeth on a project, you know?
Yeah, like Brad, if you or I had to hire, I'll be honest, how I would and this is Beth, God willing, is not going anywhere, so hopefully I don't have to hire anytime soon. But if I had to hire, the thing that I would probably do was first I would tap into my network locally, regionally, and say, hey, fellow artists or cartoonists, does anyone know of a recent graduate or someone in their 20s or maybe early 30s that would like a job? And then if that doesn't work out, then I would probably go to 2 or 3 select art universities or art colleges around and say like, hey, do you maintain a job listing for recent graduates? So that, like Brad, this is a great point from Brad. That's how we would do it. And so work backwards on that. And I think you might find some success on it.
Every assistant that I've hired it was from the University of the Arts. I don't think there's anybody that hasn't come from there. That's where I keep going every time I want to find somebody for a project like this. I go to the university and say, who do you got that has this certain skill set? So listen, Dave, with that being said, I've got one more question I'm hoping to sneak in because I don't think it's going to take too long.
Sure.
All right. And this comes in from Patreon backer Christopher Murin, who says, for a youngster who shows an interest in art, how early would you consider giving them a Wacom and other digital art tools, either in addition to or instead of traditional art supplies? Asking for an uncle. So Christopher Murin says, how early? How early do you go with this?
This is a great question, Christopher. And first of all, you're a very nice person, Chris, for doing this for, I'm assuming you are the uncle in this case, and what a nice person for doing it. I would say that as much as Brad and I have been big promoters of Wacom with good reason for professionals and pro-am cartoonists, I personally think in a situation like this, traditional tools can take you really far. And by traditional, I mean pencil and paper and pen and ink and all that sort of stuff. So for one, it's a nice thing for kids to really cut their teeth with a traditional, either a nib pen or maybe get some brushes that they wouldn't normally buy, or, you know what I mean? Some inkwell or dips that they might normally buy themselves because they're a little bit more fun and they can experiment, right? That way they understand as a kid how ink traditionally worked, how ink traditionally flowed, and the ways that artists figured out over the last 700 years to do that. So that's fun. But then I would say, Chris, instead of getting a Wacom, even though the Wacom 1 is great and it's, what is it, $300? It's a great price point. The need for a little one, a kid, to also then have a laptop, have that plugged in and navigate a bunch of wires, even though it's only one significant wire for the Wacom 1. What I'm getting at is I personally would think the better purchase would be a new or used Apple iPad Pro that can do the pen, Brad, don't you think? Because then that kid also has access to Minecraft and YouTube and all that other thing. The whole family can use it. And the pen, while not professional level, I don't think in terms of sensing data, they're getting better, but not yet at the Wacom level. It's pretty damn good, especially if you're a kid or a teen. In terms of what you can do. And so that would be my advice. What would you think, Brad?
Oh, I agree 100%. My only misgivings with like an iPad would be that they'd be spending more time on Minecraft than they would be doing art. But then again, when you're a kid, I don't know that that's necessarily a bad thing either. You don't want to turn this into a chore or a drudgery. So I would co-sign that entirely, and just also emphasize that traditional art supplies are not that terrible for a young person. I could see a real beauty in a nice set of pencils, with the 2H and the 1H and the HB and and a really nice pencil sharpener and a book about how pencil art is done, because sometimes that's not intuitive as well. I know that sounds, a little bit less flashy than presenting somebody with a brand new iPad, and it definitely is, but it's also just as nice. I mean, I could see a really nice art package with that, maybe like a roller ruler, right? That you don't necessarily need a T-square, but a rolling ruler that you can use to make lines. And a kneaded eraser, stuff like that. I think
not a kneaded eraser. No, Brad, I will fight you on that one. Not a kneaded eraser.
I threw that in to see if you were paying attention. But yeah, I could see a traditional art kit being really beautiful too. I don't know that there's a need to go digital right away. But if the kid is saying, "Oh yeah, I really want to experiment with digital art," then yeah, I think it might be a better place to go where you get that Apple Pencil and an iPad, because you don't then need all of this other stuff like a laptop and all this junk to go with it. So yeah, I think that'd be a pretty good call.
And I think, Chris, just to reinforce my earlier point, I don't know that you even need to get a new or top-of-the-line model for an iPad. I think one that's a generation past, maybe a refurbished or a renewed one. Sometimes both Apple.com or like an Amazon have refurbished or renewed versions are a great option.
Just make sure that it's compatible with the Apple Pencil, because there is a cutoff there. I found that out the hard way because I didn't pay attention to that.
And I will say, Brad, can I switch gears for a second? Because some friends of mine, Brad, for my birthday, I was so touched. They bought me traditional art supplies. They bought me a gorgeous Japanese brush pen. It's it's more brush than pen, but it was gorgeous. It's one of those like high-end ones. But have you ever had this where someone gifts you a sketchbook that's too nice, so you never sketch in it? Yeah. Because you're like, it's leather, and I can't draw a picture of a fanny in here. Like, I'm not going to draw that. Not that I'm drawing a butt. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, you can't just sketch away at a nice book. You got to, it's got to be, that's high art that's deserving of that nice book. Anyway, this Japanese brush is so gorgeous that I'm like, I don't want to mess it up. That's a nice brush. I don't want
to get ink all over that.
Yeah.
You got ink on my brush.
So it's this gorgeous $100 Japanese brush, and I'm like, I can't touch this thing. This is too nice. I don't deserve this.
I'm going to put it up in the corner. Maybe buy a holder for it.
Meanwhile, I'm an active professional artist that makes my living in art, and I don't think that I'm worthy of this GD brush.
Yeah.
It's funny.
I actually saw art students having that problem back in the day, and I heard an art professor, like somebody brought in this beautiful sheet of Bristol board, right? And the professor, and they were having a hard time making a mark on it because they didn't want to ruin this beautiful white sheet. The professor goes, "Take your shoes off." Kid takes the shoes off. He says, "Put that piece of Bristol on the floor." Puts it on the floor. He says, "Now walk on it." Back and forth 3 or 4 times. Walk, walk, walk. Now put it on your drawing board and get to work. And he says, you'll find, and he was being dead serious, it's hard to get precious about something after you've been walking on it. and they were able to kind of get past that mental blur that they had where they couldn't make a mark because they had been using it as a doormat for the last couple of minutes. And now they could say, okay, this isn't so special after all. And they could start making their art.
So A, that's a beautiful story. B, as soon as I leave this podcast, I'm going to go take my shoes off and put that Japanese brush on the ground and start jumping on it.
Yeah.
Here's how I feel about you, $100 Japanese brush.
Also a good way to break a brush. But listen, as long as you don't break your habit of listening to ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful pal, Brad Guigar, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com and the new smash hit on TikTok. What's your handle on TikTok, by the way?
At Brad Guigar.
There we go. So
Guigar, like guitar, but with a G for a T.
Now, let me ask you, you're Guigar on Twitter. Why did you not go with Guigar on TikTok?
That's a real... the only reason would have been that it wasn't available.
Oh, okay.
Because usually I go Guigar with everything.
On that exciting note, I'll say you can check out Brad over at Brad Guigar on TikTok.
Yeah. And my friend, Dave Kellett, who is nowhere to be found on TikTok. But
Not yet. Not yet. We'll see how it goes.
But you can find him as the co-director of Stripped and the cartoonist of the wonderfully delightful Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and the gripping and compelling Drive at drivecomic.com.
And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love Comic Lab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And Comic Lab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So just a reminder to head over and join us at the $10 level so you can see Comic Lab Live Gab at patreon.com/ComicLab. What character actor is that?
That's Charles Nelson Riley.
Oh, that's right. Was he that wasn't the guy that threw the tinsel, was it?
You're thinking of Rip Taylor. Or Rip Torn. Rip Torn was from Larry Sanders. You're thinking of Rip Taylor.
Rip Torn had the most incredible story. Did you ever hear about this?
I know that he was one hell of a drinker.
Yes, and he had a drink with Alec Baldwin one time up in the Hollywood Hills. And he goes to meet Alec Baldwin in a bar, and Alec Baldwin's like, "What the hell? What happened to you?" He's bloody. He's like, "Oh," and he's like 55, and he goes, two guys tried to mug me, and I punched him, fought him off." It's like Jesus.
His character on Larry Sanders is one of my all-time, like out of all the media I've ever watched, one of my all-time favorite characters because he could make you laugh until you wet yourself, and then he could make you cry like a baby. And within moments, he was so good.
For a guy who clearly had a lot of troubles in his own life,
yeah.
I mean, that's pretty clear to say, he was able to tap into that to really get some pathos in his acting.